Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another session here at CAD-1 for CAD Standards. I'm Matt Jensen, AEC Sales Specialist, along with Michael Calkins here at CAD-1. Michael,
hello,
kick
everybody.
It off.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for attending another session of our monthly AutoCAD webinars. We've got a pretty good list of attendees this time around, so sounds like CAD standards is really a topic a lot of people are interested in. It is one that we'd had some questions about and had some recommendations to conduct a webinar, and sounds like it's a good time of year, I guess. Everyone's ready for heading out for the holidays, so
we appreciate everybody taking time out of their busy day from all their holiday shopping to sitting with one of our webinars and listen to Michael here. We appreciate it. Happy holidays to everybody, by the way.
So if everybody could, we usually throw this slide up here in case anybody isn't able to hear us, but if you wouldn't mind, if everybody could click on, everybody who can hear me, click on the little raise your hand icon there that you see in the image. That just lets us know that we are in fact broadcasting and everybody can hear us. I'll see a few of them going up. Hopefully that means we got a few attendees, or everyone's able to listen and hear us. Just taking a look here real quick in the list. All right, so it sounds like we're okay. So today's topic is CAD standards. Really what we're talking about here today is the standards files layer and the layer translator tool, and I'm going to talk about templates too, because templates are a really important part of maintaining your CAD standards. Basically, instead of maintaining your standards, if you use the template correctly, you basically just adhere to the standards, and everybody has the standards in place when they fire up a new file, a new drawing. But sometimes things go a little astray. People start generating new layers. Those of you, I see a lot of people in the list here, in the attendee list, that have attended my classes. You heard me talk about people creating layers and naming them after themselves, creating random layers, hitting the new layer, and forgetting to give it a name. So we're going to talk about some of the tools we have for fixing our drawings somewhat more efficiently than having to go into the file and manually rename each one of your layers.
Big time savings here.
So let's go ahead. Whoa, what's going on here? Oh, there we go. Let me go ahead and get AutoCAD up and running here. So let's take a look here. So the first thing I'm going to show you, we'll take a look at the Manage tab here on the ribbon. This is one of those that a lot of people don't know that's there, or they've noticed it and they've just never gone in and taken a look. They see stuff like, oh, load application, run script, and they say, nope, that's nothing. You do Lisp, I don't do any scripting. That Manage tab is probably not for me. But clear over here on the right-hand side of the Manage tab, there's this CAD Standards panel. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. Now, we're going to use these tools sort of in this hypothetical situation in which you have a file of some origin. Maybe it's one of your own files from within your company. It's a legacy file that you've pulled out of an archive from 10, 12, 15 years ago that somebody's provided you, or you've downloaded it from a consultant. Any of these situations where you've received a file that maybe doesn't have all of your current Office standards applied to it. We're going to come back and we're going to look at this CAD standards, but let me talk a little bit about the template first. And I like to talk about this, again, any of you who have attended my classes have heard me say this over and over and over, that the template is probably the most important part of maintaining and creating CAD standards for your office. When you go to create a new file, ideally what you're doing is clicking up here, either clicking your little Q-New button and choosing a template. Maybe you've already assigned a specific template to that Q-New, but really what we always want to do is click the Q-New button here and use a DWT file. DWT is the file extension for your templates. That's really important that we go and create one of these. This is an example one we use for a lot of our classes, but your company can generate one of these. Really, it's just a matter of doing a save as on a file once you've gone in and established all of your standards like text and dimensions, layers and line types, all those things that need to be standardized. We'll save onto a template, and then you want to make sure you and all of your staff, all your CAD users in your company, understand that when it's time to start a new file, they want to click the DWT. They want to start a new file from a template rather than just taking the last good file that they created, or what they felt was a good file, doing a save as, erasing everything in that file, and then starting over again. That's not a very good practice on a lot of fronts. It can cause errors to get propagated forward into all your future files. It can also just have you've probably all witnessed this before. You go and you thaw a layer, and suddenly a bunch of extraneous or a bunch of random information from a previous project magically appears all over your file. That's sort of one of the day-to-day issues with doing a save as on an old file. So ideally, we're going to stick with the DWT file here. Go ahead and click open, and we'll see, we've established stuff like all of our proper layers. We're going to go in there, we're going to establish all of our text styles that we use for our company. We're going to create dimension styles, and there's a few other settings that we're going to talk about later on. We'll come back and kind of talk about some housekeeping stuff that we get a lot of questions on that might be part of a template as well. But sometimes you do find yourself in a situation where you have those files that aren't adhering to your company standards. So how do we fix those? Well, currently what a lot of people do when they don't realize they have tools for this is they'll go in, start the text manager, the text style manager, start the dimension style manager, and manually fix stuff. They'll do copy and paste and a bunch of, whatever tools they're familiar with. However, when it comes to layers, when it comes to these annotation styles, there is a tool here on the Manage tab. It's this little green check mark. Check Standards is a tool. And what this is going to do is run a comparison between the current file you're looking at and a standards file, and it will tell you, hey, we've got a text style in here that doesn't match the settings or the style settings for your standards file. The text font is wrong. Maybe the dimension styles aren't quite in sync. You're going to have things like, hey, there's a layer in here called Michael. That doesn't belong there. It's not your standards file. What do you want to do with this layer? So we can run this check. But in order to have this work, we first have to establish a standards file. So the standards file extension is DWS. Typically what you're going to do in order to establish this standards file, once you have generated that company template or the template you'd like to use as your standard, go ahead and create a new file from that template. That's what this drawing number 2 is. I just created a new file from that AEC template. And when you go up to your application menu and come down here to the Save As, we'll see right there is a drawing standards option. And it just basically saves the DWS. We know that we can retitle, we can rename our files with whatever extension, but ideally you just come up here, Save As, select Drawing Standards. Looks just like your normal Save As, but you'll see at the bottom it's already selected the DWS option from the list. That's really all this is doing. You're going to give this a name. I'll just call this one CAD-1. Oop. I was going to say CAD-1 Standards, but I bumped the return button before I was done. So we'll go with CAD-1. Now I'll go ahead and close this. You see right now I am in fact in the CAD-1 DWS file. So I'm going to close that. And, oops, sorry, we'll just say no, I don't need to save changes because I already did a save as. It wants to convert it to a DWG essentially. So what's happening now is that I'm going to go along, I've received a file, I've opened a file, another common one, I had this happen to me a few times. You open up a file from a disk or something from a project you worked on or your company worked on many years ago, and you pull it out and you go in there and all the layers are just numbers. And then your text styles aren't nearly what you would like to see. They're using old fonts that maybe aren't really in use anymore, or maybe you don't even have a custom font available and you want to substitute. So what we're going to do, let me open a file here, and here's a common, this is my example file that I've gone in here and I see that there are several layers already built into this. We also have multiple text styles built into this. There's one called hand, standard. There are some various dimension styles. In order then to run a standards check on this file, what I have to do is go to that Manage tab. And if I click the check button right now, nothing's going to happen. It's going to say, hey, there are no standards files associated with this drawing. choose OK to associate. So if I just hit OK right now, it basically takes me to this Configure Standards window. I can also go right to that Configure Standards window by clicking on the Configure button here on the CAD Standards panel. Same dialog. And it'll be blank because we haven't associated a standards file yet. So what I want to do is click the little plus sign here in the middle and go browse to the folder in which I have saved that standards file. You can create multiple standards files. You can associate that one standards file with as many files as you want. So if you are going to use this standards checker routinely on your files, I would probably recommend in the template, when you're generating the template, go ahead and check Configure Standards and assign the DWS file to that template, so every file generated going forward from that template is already pointed at the standards file.
We got a question real quick. Michael, is the feature tab, the check standards tab, available on other programs like AutoCAD Mechanical? And if so, how would I find that in my Mechanical to add the ribbon? And folks, just as a reminder, if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to chime in and we'll get them answered as soon as we can.
Yep, sorry, I forgot to point that out. There should be a questions box on your GoToWebinar console. But it should be available on all versions of AutoCAD, I believe. It depends on the installation, however. So if the installation was customized, your CAD manager may have decided to exclude the Manage tab from the installation, so you might check the installation and see if it's there. Otherwise, you know, may turn off in the CUI. I'll have to. I was going to the webinar. I thought I should double check exactly where the Manage tab resides on all the different versions. But if you're not able to find that, just send us an email to our support@CAD-1.com, and we can help you get that located for all the other versions of AutoCAD. All right, so going back here to the standards, I clicked the configure, and I went and browsed till I found the DWS file. When I click open, it's going to add that DWS file as a configuration file or standards file that we can compare to. Now, let me say it again. You can take one standards file and associate it with as many files as you like. You can also associate multiple standards file with a single drawing. But we have to understand that there could be conflicting standards when that happens. See that I can click the plus sign here a little bit again and add another style, another standards file. But basically what happens is as you stack them up here in the list, whichever standards file is highest in the list will take precedent. If there are conflicts, maybe two of your standards files both have a dimension style called architectural, well then the one at the top of the list is the one that AutoCAD is going to use as the standard. All right, so we've gone ahead, we've associated the DWS file here. I'm going to then click on this Plugins tab here at the top of the Configure Standards dialog, and we'll see this list of what are called plugins. I'm not sure why they call them plugins, but they're basically they basically let us dictate what standards are going to get checked. And you see here, at this time, what we can check are dimension styles. We can run a comparison on dimension styles, layers, line types, and text styles. And there's a little check mark there beside all of those. The reason for that is that perhaps you're not concerned with line types. Maybe in your industry you're constantly generating new line types, and that's a necessity for what you do. Maybe just uncheck line types and say, you know what, I'm not concerned if somebody's using a line type that isn't already placed into the standards file. That often happens. Line types are probably one of the, at least on the architecture side, perhaps not. I know in civil and landscape and things like that, we use a lot more line types. So it's up to you. You can decide here. I'm going to go ahead and leave all four of these checked. And when we're done here, once we've associated and we've the standards file and we've selected the plugins we want to use, if you want, you can go ahead and check this Check Standards button right here in the lower left corner. Before we do that, though, I'm going to also click this Settings button, and we'll see that Settings button then gives me options for how I should get notified of standards violations. This option right here, Display Standards Status Bar icon, we'll see once I close out of this, down here at the bottom on the status bar, I'm going to get a little binder-looking icon that indicates this file is associated with a standards file. You can also tell it whether it should display alert immediately when there is a standards violation. You click the new layer button in this file and generate a layer that is not part of that standard. AutoCAD will check and give you a little yellow balloon here in the lower right corner and tell you of that. And you can also say disable standards notifications. If you just don't want to be informed of these until you run a check, you can disable those. I'm just going to say display standards bar icon, status bar icon, and then check standard settings down beneath that. There's this automatically fix non-standard properties. So this is actually probably not what most of us would prefer. Most of the time you're probably going to want to see one by one all of the the standards violations so that you can make a decision at that time. If you say automatically fix, then you're probably not going to be aware of occasionally something that got fixed that maybe you didn't intend to change. There's also this show ignored. I'll show you we can ignore issues if we find one that we're not concerned with. And you can tell it, if I had more than one standards file, I could tell it which one to actually use. I could kind of override the scale, as the list over here, that is. So let me hit OK on that, and I'm going to go ahead and run check standards here in the lower left corner now. So here we go. Pops open the check standards dialog box now, and it tells me, hey, the dimension style architectural has properties that are non-standard. Then it says, well, what do you want to replace architectural with? And I see that there is actually an architectural dimension style in my standards file. What's nice, though, is down here at the bottom of the dialog, it gives me a preview of changes. If I decide to switch the current architectural dimension style with the standards dimension style, these are the properties which will be modified. It will be set from annotative, no, to yes. It will be changed from an overall scale to disable because it's being switched to annotative. I'm going to set the text height from 0.18 to 0.125. We're going to change the text style being used from standard to dimension, and we're going to change the precision value from a 1/16 to a 1/4 inch. I'm not too crazy about that. 1/4 inch precision for my dimensions is a little coarse, but anyway, that's what my standards file says, so that must be what I want. So when you're done, you can click, or once you're done reading through this, if you're happy with that change, go ahead, click the Fix button right here, and it takes you to the next standards violation. Problem layer swing is not standard. In this case, it's saying, well, here are all of the layers that are found in the standards files. Which one would you like to change layer swing to? I'm going to say, well, that probably represents the swing of the door, so I'm going to choose the doors layer from the list, and then I'll see that down here it's going to change the color from red to yellow. It's going to change the line type from hidden to continuous. Okay, let's go ahead and fix that. Layer electrical is non-standard, or properties are non-standard. Sorry, it says, hey, you have a layer called electrical. That's great, but the colors in your standard file are different. So we'll fix another layer, and you can, as you go through, then if you decide, hey, layer balcony, that's one that I actually want in here as a separate file, I can come in, or as a separate layer, that is, I can come in here and say, mark this problem as ignored at the bottom of the screen. I can also just say next. Next doesn't really ignore it, it just skips it. If I choose mark problem as ignored, at the bottom it's going to mark this ignored by M. Calkins in this case, because that's my user login for this computer. If somebody else runs a standards check later on and they find this violation in there, they can say, well, why hasn't that been fixed? They say, oh, well, Michael ignored it. Michael's the CAD manager. He must be okay with that. I'm going to ignore it too. In the settings, I can also just say next time I run through this, if I click settings here, next time I run a standards check, don't show me the ignored problems next time around. If I uncheck show ignored problems, and I run another check next week or in a month, it'll ignore this problem. It won't even show it to me next time. So I'll say mark is ignored, hit next, another layer. I'm just going to hop some of these. I'll say next, next, next. I should have picked a file that wasn't quite so. Fix that one. Fix, 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 fix. Okay. So once you finally get to the end of the standard check, it'll give you this check complete. It gives you a little report. Problems found 11. Fixed automatically none because I turned off the automatic repair. Fixed manually 6. I told it to fix 6. I ignored 1. So you notice there were 11 problems found, but only 7 were dealt with. That's because I just hit next and skipped over a bunch of the problems. They weren't really ignored as AutoCAD thinks of them. They were just skipped. If I run a check in a little while again, those will all come back again. Those other 4 that I didn't actually do anything with will pop up in the list. So there we go. Once I'm done, I hit close, do your save or save as or whatever it is that you want to do with this file, and you have now run a standards check. Now look down here at the bottom of the screen now. I'll go ahead and point this out. When I was setting up the configure standards, I selected right there, or in the settings I said display status bar icon, and this is what it looks like, a little blue manual or binder. That's my indication that I have a standards file associated with the file. If I click that blue binder, it runs the check standards. It's the same as clicking here on the Manage tab, the green check mark. So I can hit check, and it will also run this right here. So sometimes, though, probably many times, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you have more than just 1, 2, or 3 files that need to be validated. You want to run a check on those. Maybe it's an active project. You're getting, you've got a few days or weeks into all of these drawings, and you're looking through and saying, I think we're getting a little bit off course here. We're getting a lot of random layers. We're getting a lot of dimension styles and stuff that aren't quite doing what we want when we print. So if you want to run a check, or maybe you actually, if you're a CAD manager that is in charge of sort of adhering to these standards, and maybe make sure your staff is adhering to these standards, there is a tool, and I'm not going to run through the whole thing. I'm just going to show you where it resides. There is actually a batch standards file checker. It does not reside inside of AutoCAD itself. It is actually going to be found under your Start menu in the Autodesk folder. We're going to browse all the way down to AutoCAD 2014, expand that, and we'll find right there this batch standards checker. And the main reason I'm not going to run it is because you have to close out of AutoCAD in order for this to work, and I don't have to restart AutoCAD right now. So if you click batch standards checker, you basically point the standards checker. You get to configure the settings like we did inside of AutoCAD. You point it at a folder of files, and it will run a standards check for all of those files. Rather than popping up a dialog box, what it does produce for you is an XML file, which is viewable in a web browser. And it will go through and give you details of all the different standards violations. So it's not going to repair the violations. It's going to give you a report on those. So perhaps you're not the one in charge of repairing those. You are just administering the drawings in some way. You can give that report. You can send the report to somebody and say, here you go. I found the following 30 problems in in all these files. Please go through and repair all of these issues. Go make sure all your text and your dimensions match the standards we've been asking you to use. I do know of a couple organizations that I personally have taught how to use this that have very stringent guidelines as to the drawings, the deliverables that their consultants provide. In some cases, it's almost a life safety issue when it comes to, say, like healthcare or critical facilities, that the incoming data from consultants who do engineering designs and things like that, that their standards they're in adherence to the standards of the facility using those CAD files. They want to be able to find the information quickly and easily. So they might run a standards check against the incoming files, and should they find a bunch of violations, they can just reject the deliverables and say, please repair it. Here's a list of the problems. Please go in and fix those and resubmit your files. And I know that's the case because I taught one organization how to do that, and that's exactly what the standard, the policy that they've implemented is that they will run this check before they roll those drawings into their own database. All right, so that is the basics of the check standards. So again, go to your Manage tab. You're going to need to configure first. If you don't already have a standards file associated with it, you're going to have to also make that standards file. So save as DWS, and then click the little check and run your checks against that drawing.
Any other questions on the check standards feature before we move forward.
We're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about the layer translator we see here. So if there's any questions, go ahead and type those in. We can return to that here at the end as well. So the layer translator, let me go open here another file. Hey, it looks kind of familiar. This one's called Translate Layers though. Another common issue, I mentioned this before, is that you have a file. Maybe you're not worried about standards. Let's say the dimension, textiles, those kind of things aren't really the critical concern when working with another file. But what is sometimes a problem is the layer naming conventions might be a problem for you, because you're going to work with this file going forward for quite a while, and you don't want to have to kind of pull out a cheat sheet that shows, hey, layer number 1 is the walls, layer number 2 was the doors, layer number 3 was curbs or road alignment or road edges or something. Whatever it is that the layers you need to use are. And I've been in this very situation. I pulled up a 15-year-old file that was just, the layers were numbered 1 through 255, and I kind of had to figure out what was what. So rather than just working that way, we can go into this file and translate the old layers to match the standard layers that we want to use. Now to do this, again, on the Manage tab, there is a tool called Layer Translator right here at the top of the list. And when you open this up, you're going to get this dialog box. Expand that out a little bit. On the left side, we have this Translate From window. These are the layers found in the current file. On the right is Translate To. It's blank because I haven't yet assigned a layer list, a file with a layer list that I can compare to. So the first thing you need to do is come right here to Load. Click the Load button and go select the file that you would like to use as your kind of your standard layer list. It does default to DWT files. It's looking for your templates. So if you have a company template, just go browse to that and select it. You can, however, choose from DWG files. If you already have another DWG file that uses that a layer list, go grab it. There's that standards file. I can use the standards file, which I just created. Or in a minute, we're going to see, once I've run through a layer translation, I can save that as a DWS file and load it into another file, and it will run that layer mapping, that layer translation automatically for me. I don't have to go pick A and B over and over and over in every file. So we have these 3 file types we can choose from. I'm going to go ahead and use here this AEC Imperial template, which I used to create my standards file earlier. Click Open. And on the right-hand side, we'll see that the Translate To window populates with the layers found in that template. Obviously, your templates most often are going to have, a whole lot more layers than this. Let's just say 150, 200, whatever. They're all going to be listed in that window. So now we run the translation. Before I get into that, I'll show you really quick. There are a couple layers in here that have a slightly different icon on the left side. It has a little tiny broom on that icon. If you've ever used the Purge command from the application menu, you'll recognize that broom. That means that is a purgeable or unused layer. Nobody has put anything on layer dimensions yet. I can select that layer and right-click on it and choose Purge Layers. I can also select the range of layers and right-click and say Purge Layers, and that would purge any of the unused layers. Def points is shown as unused. It's not purgeable. We all know that. Def points, you really can't get rid of it once it's there. But I can grab that and say, well, that layer is not in use. I'm not going to use it. Let me just purge it out of there. Okay, so it's gone. Actually, I did try to purge def points, it looks like. But I'm not sure why it tried to do that. It's going to come right back. Anyway, before then, we start going 0 to 0, border to border from left to right. We can come down here and click this button right here in the middle called Map Same. And when you click that, AutoCAD will just automatically run a comparison and says, hey, there was already a layer called border. There was a layer called border in your standard file. Let's go ahead and just map those together. It saves you from having to click those, whatever, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, whatever layers, and map them and go find them. It takes care of a lot of the work automatically for you. It does, though, show you what the color is getting translated to. It's going to use the incoming properties. It's just going to map the names across. Now I've got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 leftover layers which have not been assigned automatically. So now I have to go through the process of grabbing the layer on the left. Just click a layer on the left. You can also do Control or Shift, perhaps balcony and outlets or whatever. Any 2 layers, 3 or 4, whatever, that you want to map to the same other layer, you can do that. Maybe you'll find 2 layers, one called door, another one called doors. They should both get mapped over to your A-door layer. Go ahead and grab them using Control or Shift. If I want to choose balcony, I look over here on the right and I see, well, I don't know, I'm just going to randomly pick something here. Let's go with, I'll just choose walls for the time being. Once I've picked one on the left and a layer on the right, I hit this map button here in the middle, and it will add that mapping here to the bottom of the list at the bottom. And it removes it from the left. Of course, I can still use that layer on the right, so I can just keep on going. Here's viewports. I'll map that to viewports on the right. Click Map. I'll grab chairs and map that to furniture. Hit Map again. Kitchen. We'll map over here. I'll just choose, oh, I don't know, let's choose furniture again. Obviously, this is not your standard kind of setup, but I'll map outlets to electrical, and then finally swing, I'll map over to doors. Also, if you've been in my classes, you've heard me rant about this. Don't put a miscellaneous layer in your files. I usually try and delete that before I show these files, but that's just bad practice, because what goes on miscellaneous layers? Anything and everything, whatever you want to put on, miscellaneous stuff. So it just confuses other people going down the line. So I've run through, I've maybe had 50 or 60 or 100 layers that I had to map. That took a lot of time. It could take me the better part of a morning to map this. I don't want to have to do that for every single one of the files I'm pulling over from an old project. So once I've gone ahead and made these translations, down here at the bottom of the screen, the bottom of the dialog, there's this Save button. So before I hit the Translate button, I'm going to click Save, and it's going to ask me to save this as a DWS. So give this thing a name. Call it like, Smith Residence Translation. Let's just call it. So name it after the project, whatever the project is that you're happen to be working on, because this is probably not, this translation was specific maybe to a certain batch of files you're going to run this work on. Don't just call it layer translation and save it off in space, because somebody else might think it works for their files, and it could potentially really mess theirs up. So I'm going to hit Save right here. So now you see the Save button is grayed out. I've saved that out, and I can recall it later on if I need. So once I'm done here, I could hit Translate. I do want to just go show you the settings option, just because, we can customize and change the settings of pretty much everything in AutoCAD. So here for Layer Translator, I can tell AutoCAD to force objects color to by layer. That's nice. If you ever get into files, I prefer to stick with by layer as much as possible on color, line type, transparency, all those things. If you open up a file and people have been in there really changing stuff, the properties of individual elements as opposed to changing them by layer, you can force them back to by layer as they come across. I can also translate objects in blocks, so if you have any blocks, you probably do, and there are layers nested in that block, you can tell it to go and force those layers as well. Probably what you want. In fact, in my experience, this happens. That's actually one of the main causes of bad layers or incorrect layer names being found in a file, is that you brought a block in from another source, you downloaded it from the web, and it introduces an odd layer. This will let you fix those layers inside the blocks. You can tell it to write a translation log. It'll create a log file, it's a TXT file basically. You can open a notepad and go read what happened. You can go see exactly what got translated. And you can say show layer contents when selected. If I check that, it's basically like the layer walk tool. There we go. When I click on the doors in the layer list now, I see what is going to be found on that layer. So if you ever use layer walk, it's essentially the same thing here. Alright, so I've changed my settings, I've done my mappings, I saved the mapping before I hit the translate button here at the bottom. And what it does then, when you hit translate, is it actually goes through, it converts those objects over to the proper layer, and it also purges out those layers. Purges out the old layers. So you're not going to be left behind with just these random layers that have nothing on them. It purges them all out. in the same command. So if there were layers that weren't mapped, it doesn't just load in a bunch of layers that aren't in use. It's only going to list here the layers on which objects are not found. So if you want to pull through a layer list and to populate this with your standards layer or your standard layer list, you're going to have to use a few of your other methods. Design Center is my favorite. Just grab the layers and pull them through, and it populates through. I know every office has a little trick that they use to do that, sometimes copying and pasting a block with all the layers nested into it, whatever you want to use. But anyway, this layer translator will only apply layers which things have been mapped to. And that's pretty much the process for doing your first standards check. So somebody comes along and says, okay, well, we've got another file, or you are provided another file for that same project. You just know you've got multiple files to go. Later on, I'm going to say, no, let's not save those changes. Maybe you come back and say, here's another file. This is floor 2. This is the another file for that same project that I was provided. I can come into that file and click Layer Translator again. But this time, instead of saying, let's go and load in a standards file and do map 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and take all the morning to do that again, what I'm going to do is click Load. And instead of choosing another DWG or a DWT file, I'm going to switch here at the bottom to the DWS standards and go select that translation which I saved a few minutes ago. There's my Smith Residence Translation, DWS. And when I click Open, AutoCAD will automatically run that mapping for you. It says, hey, the following whatever 12 files or 12 layers were already mapped in that DWS file. It'll run that same mapping for you. So if you had 100 layers that had been mapped in the previous round of Layer Translator and you saved that, you can save all that work. You just had to load it in and you're done. You still might want to purge layers. If there's something that for some reason didn't map across, I guess I didn't save that. That's interesting. Go ahead and fix any additional layers that pop up and go ahead and hit your translate. Maybe if you've made changes to it, you can do save again here at the bottom and save it as a new standards or overwrite your previous DWS file that has that mapping built into it. All right, so we got a couple of questions here. Will it pull layer descriptions and apply them to old drawings as well? I believe it will. I believe it pulls all your properties across. I guess I've never tested that specifically, but it's not showing it here in the list, so I can't swear to that. I'd have to test that, but yeah, I would hope it would, because that's one of the, it's a really nice thing to do if you're applying a new standard, a new layer standard to old drawings or to legacy files or existing files in your company. If you're establishing a whole new standard, descriptions are a great way to help your coworkers understand what those layers are used for. So unfortunately, I'd have to test that real quick. I don't have an answer for you right now. Reading a couple other questions. Will XREF layers show in the layer translator? They should not. These because you can't really put objects onto an XREF layer. It's the XREF layer is there. You can change its properties, but you can't use it to place objects onto that layer, so they will not show up. Should not show up. I have never seen them in there. I guess I've played around with it quite a bit. I've not seen the XREF layers show up in the layer translator. These will just be your live layers for that file. All right, so we've run that translation. I'm going to hit Translate, and changes to the layer translation mapping data have not been saved. What do you want to do? Let's just say this is actually telling me, hey, you've created a mapping, another layer mapping translation. What do you want to do? Do you want to save that for future use? It does give you the opportunity here before you lose all that work. It gives you one last chance to say, yep, oh yeah, let's save that. Or I could say, no, I've already saved this information. Let me translate only, and it switches everything over. Now, there's all kinds of discussions to be had about, before you run this, make sure that you have archived copies of the files so that you don't, just in case the mapping goes wrong, you chose the wrong mapping, maybe you had two that were very similar, and you accidentally just translated over a whole bunch of stuff to the wrong layers. just make sure you've got archived copies of whatever you're doing, because this is doing a large batch of work for you in just a few steps. So it's Murphy's Law here. Sometimes things go wrong when even though you thought you did everything just right. So it's a good idea to save backups.
And if it goes wrong, you can always give us a call.
If it goes really wrong, give us a call. Tell them Michael steered you wrong, and I'll have Jennifer help you.
Don't pull your hair out.
Call Matt. Call Matt. He'll help you. So I do want to talk about a couple other things. Feel free to keep typing questions if everything comes to you here. I do want to talk about a couple other items. This is probably I'm going to show you something here real quick. One of the things that happens oftentimes when we're creating templates. So let me take a step back here. Let me create a new file. And I'm working on this DWG file I've created here. So my idea right now is that I want to create a template. I'm establishing a new template for my company. Now, I'm not going to get into the other things that are part of the template, like styles and creating layers. What I do want to show is that at this time, once I'm happy with this template as it is, and I come up here, what the best process here is to click on your application menu in the upper left corner, come down here to the Save As option, and save this as a drawing template. And there's a reason I'm going to show this here, and there's a reason I'm telling you to use Save As Drawing Template to save this as a DWT file. So I'm going to save this as my CAD-1 standard template. There we go. And when I hit the Save button, the reason I told you to choose Save As Template is that it gives me another dialog box, a secondary dialog box. If I just did Save As DWG and then I go retitle or rename that to a DWT file in my Windows Explorer or whatever, I don't get this option right here. I'm not worried about this stuff. You can add a description, whatever. Most people aren't worried about that. What I do want to show you is this right here. New layer notification. Show of hands. How many of you have, and by that I mean click on your little raise hand thing, how many of you have a file or multiple files that you go hit the plot button, and before it goes to the plot dialog it says unreconciled new layers found, what do you want to do? And you have to click cancel or whatever. I know there's a lot of you out there that have this because we get calls about this all the time. In the AutoCAD Advanced class I teach, on many occasions I have had students tell me this setting alone, yeah, I see some hands going up there. This setting alone, I've had people tell me, made the entire 3-day class worthwhile. I had somebody, I can't remember where they flew in from. They came from a pretty far, long distance, and he told me, like, oh, that setting alone just made this whole week worth the effort of coming here. The rest of the class was pretty good too, by the way, but that was his main reason. He was very excited. This right here, save all layers as unreconciled. If you are not concerned about layer naming conventions in your files, leave this setting, save all layers as unreconciled. If you choose the other option, save all layers as reconciled, what you're telling your template is that there are 100 layers in this template. Those are the reconciled layers, and as soon as somebody adds a layer which is not part of that original list, it wants to notify you of that unreconciled layer, that standard layer violation. It's saying, hey, this layer A-walls is not part of your standard list. What do you want to do with it? And if you look at it, it gives you the option. You can say, yes, I actually want to accept that layer as a reconciled layer. It will then ignore that layer going forward in that file. Most people aren't that concerned. The average user, I find, is not concerned about layer naming conventions. They'll take care of it. Now you know about your standards check and things like that. You can take care of it that way, or they'll use another method to fix the layer. So and this thing that keeps popping up is just due to GoToMeeting. It's causing some Windows stuff here. But so I'll say save all layers as unreconciled and hit OK. And now there's my template. And I'll go ahead and close my template. Now if you do already have a bunch of files which are prompting you every time you hit the plot button to check to reconcile the layers, there is a method by which you can save this, or you can change that, sorry. You can go into your layer property manager, however you like to get there. I usually just click the icon on the layers panel, type layer. In the layer property manager palette, this is one of those, when I found out about this, I just wondered how I'd managed to not notice this for so long. Up here in the upper right hand corner of the layer property manager, there's a little tiny wrench icon. Where we see the wrench in AutoCAD, that's your settings. It's settings for some particular aspect of AutoCAD. So I click the little settings wrench, and I get my layer settings dialog box, and the very first option right here is new layer notification. If this is checked, AutoCAD will be running, constantly monitoring the layer names for new layers which weren't there when that file was initially created. You can tell it how it should evaluate right here. Evaluate new layers added to the drawing. You can say evaluate new XREF layers only, or evaluate all new layers. Notify when new layers are present. This little check mark is actually what's causing that pop-up every time you hit the plot button saying there are new layers. And it's saying when should it notify you? When you open the file, when you attach or reload XREFs, if you restore a layer state up here, should it warn you of an unreconciled layer? And when you hit the save button, or when you insert objects. So maybe you have this issue where you're inserting blocks often and they pull in bad layers or inappropriate layers. You can tell it when I hit the insert command, maybe only when you insert objects, should it prompt you that there are bad layers. Most of this is the default right here, so you're seeing right here that it's pretty much telling you all the time, and display alert for plot when new layers are present. That's this bottom one here. That's actually the one that's causing that to pop up. If you're, again, not concerned with any kind of layer naming convention, just uncheck the very top new layer notification and save your file. Unfortunately, let me show you this. You notice this little icon right here, it looks like the DWG icon. That represents the fact that this setting is per drawing. It is drawing specific. So if you've got 100 files, all of which are notifying you of this problem, this new layer, you're going to have to go into all 100 files and turn this setting off. Sorry, but that's what you're going to have to do. So again, that's why I made such a big deal about when you're saving a template, go through Save As Drawing Template, go to that second dialog box after you name it and turn off Save the new layer notification, Save All Layers as Unreconciled. Go ahead and select that option. That way, and then teach your users when they start a new file, use that template. Because if they go into an old file, do a Save As on a DWG that has new layer notification turned on, guess what? The new file has new layer notification turned on as well. This is one way that you can kind of stop that going forward. If it keeps propagating itself forward, that means people are doing a Save As on old files. Okay, we got a few questions coming up. I have a standard 2014 installation, but I do not have the Manage tab. Is there an easy way to get the tab up without reinstalling AutoCAD? It should be. Oh, let me go check. Installation stuff is where sometimes I get a little, I kind of tend to forget how we go and repair that. I'm going to check something real quick. It could be in your customized user interface.
We normally just suggest you bang the side of your machine a couple of times.
Slap the side of your monitor and see if it magically pops up. I believe this is part of the CUI, so if it's been excluded from your customized user interface file, you might have to reload the standard AutoCAD CUI. I also neglected to check whether AutoCAD LT actually has the Manage tab built into it. So if you're using LT, that also might not be there. The Express tools are not part of LT. I'm not entirely sure if the Manage tab is part of LT. I'd have to go verify that. I do not have LT installed on this machine at this time, I don't believe. So unfortunately, I'd have to check that. But do give us call our support line. That would sort of fall under the installation category that we provide. We always provide support for everybody on installation, and we can make sure to get that located for you. Another question from William here. If a client demands that your CAD files conform to their standard, is it reasonable to require that they give you their DWS file? I would tend to say yes, because it really makes this process much more successful, makes it much more likely to be successful. If they're saying, here are the text dimension styles that we like to use, here are the layers that we expect you to conform to. If they have the know-how, ask them if they'd be willing to give you a DWS file that has those standards so you can run a check against it. If they don't have that, maybe have them call us and we'll teach them how to produce that. Otherwise, I'd say go ahead and produce your own DWS file. If you're going to be doing a lot of work for that client, it would pay off. You will save a lot of time, especially if you find that you're commonly having standard violations in those files that you're providing them. So I would say yes, it's reasonable. I'm on the side that I kind of look at it and say it's not too hard to do this. They might not have the know-how, so we will have to address that, and that's certainly something that we as CAD-1 could help them with. Question from Mandy: can you get back to this option after the fact? I guess I'm not sure which option that was, but pretty much any options, any settings in your mapping, in your layer translator, or in your check standards. When you run the check standards again, let me cancel this. Later on down the line, if you run a check standards, there will be a settings button right there that we can modify. Same with the layer translator. We can come down here and change your settings down here. So depending on exactly what you mean there, you should be able to change any settings or options even after you've initially set up something, and you can resave and change the way that things progress. Yeah, so Jan noted that yes, the customized workspace. Customized workspace. Yes. So part of your customized user interface are your workspaces. These guys up here. So this saves sort of the location and what displays. So if your company has a custom workspace saved, like Michael's awesome workspace. I must have saved that when I was doing the workspaces webinar a few months ago.
Or when you were 12.
I name everything Michael's awesome when I'm customizing stuff. That way I know it's mine.
You are awesome.
If it doesn't say,
I'm not gonna lie,
if it doesn't say awesome, I probably didn't create it. So in the customized user interface, there is also workspace settings. So if again your company has customized some of these things, they might have specifically excluded the customized tab, thinking, hey, nobody in the office knows how to use this. I'm just going to save some space on the ribbon by excluding it from that workspace. So yeah, you can go in there. If you do have a CAD manager, it would be worth talking to them and asking them, do they understand what these tools do, and would they be willing to give you access to them, because now they'll be very useful for you. We have a question from Joe. On that layer setting dialog where you discuss new layer notification, lower down is a toggle for paper space viewport use. Why do you have that set to off instead of VP freeze? How do those differ in practice? So I think if I understand you right, Joe, then what's happening here, this new VP freeze, I believe is what you're talking about, new layer notification, paper space viewport. Yes, so this new VP freeze, you can toggle between frozen and thawed. What this represents, new VP freeze, is if after this point, if I freeze the layer windows in this new VP freeze column, later on if I generate a new viewport in this file on one of my layouts, the Windows layer will already be viewport frozen in that viewport. So if you like to create, in my files, I like to create a layer called X lines for my construction and layout geometry, and I like to make it, I make it non-printing by default, so it wouldn't print even if I see it in a viewport, but I also like to make it new VP frozen. So if I have a bunch of construction lines in my drawing, when I generate a new layout with a new viewport, I don't want to see those construction lines in there because it makes it hard to see what I'm going to get when I print. When I generate a new layout now, or a new viewport, let's say, let's erase that one. We'll go create a new rectangular. We'll see that in this viewport, layers windows and X lines are already over here. they're already frozen in that viewport, BP frozen. So it acts as sort of basically what has to happen here is you have to know that that layer should not display in any viewports going forward. It takes a little forethought when you generate a new layer. You can say, yeah, don't show that layer in that viewport. You can always go back and tell it to show that layer if you decided, if you change your mind there, but get that to go away, then I can get those layers to come back in there. So it saves you a little bit of time if, in fact, later on you're going to be creating new layouts and new viewports. Joe also notes that Denver Water is now provides a DWS file. CAD-1 has worked with Denver Water for a long time, so I'm guessing that Warren had something to do with that, helping you guys establish that standard. So so I'd say yes, in the case of Denver Water, in the case of some of these like municipalities that really have that requirement that incoming files adhere to their standards, it's not unreasonable to ask those organizations to provide you a DWS file. Hopefully that'll be, that would help. They'll just make the whole process a lot more successful, I think, if they're willing to do that. Okay, so that's pretty much everything we had for today. If there are any more questions, I don't see anybody else chiming in there. Let me just really quickly, let's take a look at...
I have a question. What the heck am I supposed to get for my wife for Christmas? Is anybody else in that boat? Because I am screwed.
Jewelry never disappoints, I think. Really quickly, for future events, please check out our website, CAD-1.com. There will be at the top, there'll be a link for events, and under that, there'll also be one for webinars. So we do have a whole list of webinars we're planning for 2014. It's already almost 2014, if you can believe that. Go check out our website. Also there, you'll find, actually, let me go ahead and click on that. That is a reason I did this. You'll also find on there a link to our previous recorded webinars right here in the lower left. If you come down a little ways and click on that, it'll take you to our YouTube channel, and if you come back here in a few days, probably after the holidays, you'll find this webinar recorded for you, and you can watch it again if you would like. And any of our previous webinars should be uploaded there as well.
A lot of free resources.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. If any of you are Revit users, all the Revit webinars, any of you Civil 3D users, Brian Haley's Civil, not a Civil Chat, but a specific topic ones are loaded up there. So thanks for coming. I really do appreciate all the people who've been attending. I see a lot of you, every single webinar I conduct, I see a lot of familiar names on there. So I really do appreciate that all of you are attending these and that finding that people are interested in these. I also wanted to point out there were a few of you from all over the world. I think we had like 6 countries, Canada, Iraq, Peru, we're all on the list. I think we had somebody from Russia on there. So thank you all also for attending this, and tell your friends. These are free. We do these every month, so have them tune in as well. We love seeing people from all over the place. So, and check us out on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn. CAD-1 and myself are on there.
And Serbia. That's nice. All right.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Thanks, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, guys.
Happy New Year. Happy holidays.
Everybody. Have a great 2014.
We'll see you next year.